Committee, March 12th, 2026. We start off with roll call.
Mrs. Crossan,
I'm here.
Mr. Hartline,
Present.
Mrs. Krieger.
Here.
All right. Everyone's present.
Next, can we do an approval of the agenda?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Next is the approval of the prior meeting's minutes.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Nothing again. Any community comments?
We have none.
So we can start next with the presentation of the audit report.
All right. So Carl Hogan is here today to review the draft audit statements. We'll present the final draft at the board meeting on the 24th. So I will turn it over to you. Let me.
So I just put together a couple slides instead of going through the whole, document, kind of similar to what I've done in the past. So I'll just kind of go over the things that I think are most important to the board members, the community, what kind of audit report you had, whether, unmodified audit report. Number two, the financial results, and also whether there's any significant findings associated with our audit for the year ended June 30th, 2025. So probably be about 10, 15 minutes, and then I'll open it up for any questions if there's any kind of questions, concerns. But I think the information that you're going to see here today is pretty consistent with what was being reported to the board throughout the year and at year end as you went into the new budget process. I can't believe I'm saying this for 26, 27, so you're halfway through 25, 26, and this kind of gets you a baseline as of 24, 25 as you move forward into the 26, 27 budget season. The first thing I put together here, like I just said, just to go over the audit scope and the process of the audit opinions, financial statement highlights like I just spoke about, and then the engagement finalization for the presentation of the final audit to the board. So the audit scope within the audit package, or the 70, 80 page document that you receive, there's specific reports that we provide to the board of directors. The first being the report on the district's financial statements, in which we provide an opinion on the financial statements. We provide a report on internal control to determine whether there's any types of what we call significant deficiencies or material weaknesses in the internal control of the school district. We'll speak about the required government communication letter. There's certain things that we're required to report to you as the board. They're considered required communications to the board. And then finally, there's the report on internal control over compliance with major programs, federal awards. And I think I've said this before, it's the smallest piece of revenue that you get, but may be the longest or the most audit procedures we have to apply to your revenue as a district as a whole. So the first thing I just want to kind of point out, I have a slide here on the audit process. I want to point up at the top here, we do apply a risk-based approach. It'd be impossible for us to audit every single transaction within the school district. So what we have to do is kind of look at those areas that we determine to be those areas that require the most attention, and then kind of base our testing off of that. So as part of the audit process, the first thing we do is we get an understanding of the district, understanding of the district's internal controls, and from that point in time, what we do is develop our audit procedures designed around our initial risk-based approach, looking at the district. Some of the major things that we look at during the audit, significant estimates. Some of the significant estimates that we look at are related to your OPEB and pension. Also, we have significant estimates related to your self-insurance, and then also related to depreciation on capital assets. Some of the other areas that we look at, obviously your expenses and expenditures. We focus a lot of our time on salaries and benefits since that makes up most of the expenditures and expenses of the school district. Revenue recognition, we look at your revenue. We're able to apply very effective audit procedures to your revenue just because of the nature of your revenue, because we're able to what we call deploy third-party confirmations for tax revenues and then also get a third-party confirmation from the state. So when we're doing audits, the most effective audit procedure you can have is third-party confirmations. So what we do is we get audit confirmations from your tax collectors, from the recorder of deeds, from the tax claim bureau, and then also we compare that to what the district has recorded, and then that's a very effective audit procedure. So at the end of the day, we're actually able to confirm through third parties almost over 90% of the district's revenue on an annual basis. Also, we do third-party confirmation of your general obligation debt. We perform procedures over your capital assets, like I spoke about before, looking at the estimates for depreciation and also vouching any kind of material additions. And then also we apply compliance procedures over your federal and state grants. So the first thing I want to speak about is the audit opinion. No surprise, financial statement audit is unmodified. The auditor's report that will be presented within the auditor's report doesn't have any types of modifications within the audit report. So if you had a modification with the audit report, that would indicate that the financial statements were not in accordance with GAAP, etc. But the financial statements that were presented, that will be presented in the final audit report, are considered unmodified, clean audit opinion for Centennial School District for June 30th, 2025. Related to your federal and state awards, you'll also receive an unmodified opinion on compliance related to them. And also on the right-hand side there, we're not going to report any kind of material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. We're always talking or having verbal recommendations with management, and even during this format here, during the finance committee, for any types of improvements that may need to be made, but nothing that would rise to the level of what we consider a material weakness or a significant deficiency. And then our major program that we audited during the current year was the Child Nutrition Program. I'm excited that the ESSER money is away. Now we could get on a regular rotation where we could test child nutrition, Title I, and IDEA on a rotating 3-year basis, like was done in the past. Here's some of the governance communications, like I spoke about before, that were required. First and foremost, in note 1 of your financial statements are your significant accounting policies. There was a change for the current year. There was a new GASB that impacted the school district during the current year. There was actually 2. GASB 101 and 102, and we'll kind of go over those in more detail and how that impacted the financial statements, and I have that on the next slide. There were no unusual transactions that we noted during our audit. We didn't have any types of difficulties or significant audit entries or uncorrected misstatements or that involved disagreements with management. Once again, estimates that involve within the financial statements. And then finally, within the other section there, management provides us representations at the end of the audit that they've given us all the information as requested. We didn't note any other consultations with any other auditors, and there were no other significant matters discussed outside the normal course of our audit. And then finally here with other, there's a significant report that needs to be filed with the state on an annual basis called the Annual Financial Report. And that was filed with the Pennsylvania Department of Education. And I know for the current year, this is Vera's first, Pete, her second one. This year they made it a little bit more complicated where they had to spread the expenditures out by building. So I think that added a layer of complexity to a lot of our clients. So, but that got all done in a timely manner. They keep on adding, just like GASB keeps on adding GASBs, they keep on adding different layers to the AFR on an annual basis. GASB 101 was implemented during the current year. The biggest difference related to GASB 101 previously for any kind of compensated absences, for any sick days or vacation days, there were recorded as a liability in the past. We would look as of June 30th, 2025, who's owed what you said, it was $40 a day for their sick days, or who's owed vacation at a per diem rate. But what GASB 101 required us to do is not only are we going to count that as a liability, but we need to look at what is the probability that somebody's going to use their sick days. Here's our total sick bank, and what's the probability that it is going to be used as actual sick time at a per diem rate. So Tom and his staff had to go through the exercise of looking at, here's what our total sick days are, and we're telling our clients to take a 3-year average of, here's how many sick days were used a year, here's what's accrued on an annual basis, took that average, applied it to the total sick bank at a per diem rate, and came up with a number. So basically what happened was your compensated absences liability, you'll see that it increased. The good news is the materiality at which we record that, we were able to put the whole difference through the current year and not have to restate the beginning balance. It's just another layer of complexity that they're adding to these financial statements on an annual basis, and more work for Tom and his staff but now they have a baseline for how they're going to come up with this liability on an annual basis, and we can just roll with it moving forward now. So the hardest part is just getting it set up, and then you could move it forward. The next is GASB 102. Certain risk disclosures. We kind of went through this. We have a checklist. There was nothing within any of these matters here that would rise to a level that would be a significant, what we consider a significant risk to the school district. Your collective bargaining agreements are acting like they should. There's no strikes, etc. But we didn't know any of these matters, that would need to be, that would materially impact the school district as a risk related to these types of footnote disclosures. Now we're going to go over the financial results. So the first thing here, as in previous years, I'm going to go over the budget to actual schedule. And that budget to actual schedule, the expenditures, it's kind of broken out between all the different functions. There's a lot of ups, there's a lot of ups and downs, but at the end of the day, I just wanted to look at the totals for this presentation here. But I did want to point out the revenues up at the top. I think I just want to it's notable to note that these revenues are decelerating. I mean, if I look at these numbers in the previous year, I think they were $5-6 million more than budget. So what we're seeing across the board in all our school districts is that period of time when we're seeing, especially your local source revenues, transfer taxes, earned income taxes, they were raising at a pretty good clip, and then the investment earnings kicked in, and you were getting those investment earnings better than anticipated because you wanted to be conservative. You still want to be conservative. We just don't know what direction they're going to go, but they are precipitously slowing down on that top line there. So where you were seeing $5, $6, $7 million being better than anticipated, we only saw $2 million in the current year. So I think continue to evaluate, especially those local source revenues, get the information from your third parties, collecting earned income taxes, etc., to determine, a conservative approach as you kind of look at your revenues moving forward into future budget cycles. Expenditures, just as in previous years, you do a good job in terms of, what your expenditures are going to be. I mean, there's things that are unanticipated. I think if we expanded this and looked at it, I think pupil transportation and special education associated with that were some of the more amounts that were over budget, but then you had some amounts that were under budget. But once again, I think a lot of school districts are still struggling with special education and trying to anticipate those costs on an annual basis. And I think we've had that conversation before. And as we come down below, so you originally anticipated to use about $2.9 million of fund balance. You made a decision during the budget process to make up that deficit by transferring money over from the debt service fund to kind of subsidize that. You actually didn't have to go ahead and use that transfer over from the debt service fund because it was better than anticipated revenues and a little bit better than anticipated expenditures during the year. But we'll kind of look at that. You did make a transfer during the year to the capital projects, but we'll look at that in a second. So overall, when you take everything into account, you were able to only use 280,000 to keep your fund balance at that static level, about $12.5 million, in comparison to the previous year. So any questions, concerns? No? So here's what I was talking, it's the same information I just showed you from before. You have your general fund, also you have your capital projects fund, or in essence, your capital reserve fund. You don't have any bond money currently sitting within that fund, and then your debt service fund. So there's the same information we just looked at with the general fund, slight decrease. The capital projects fund, projects during the year, nothing major, $3.3 million of total expenditures. You were able to take advantage of a refunding during the current year. Those are far and few between these days. But you did move money from the debt service fund over to the capital projects fund to help kind of replenish for those projects that happened during the year. We've had this conversation before. The board has made the decision to move the money when there's been surpluses in the past couple of years. We've moved that money over to the debt service fund. There's more flexibility from the debt service fund. If you move that money to the capital projects fund or the capital reserve fund, it literally can't come back on the annual financial report. I know Tom's talked to the board finance committee, so we were able to move $2 million from the debt service fund over to the capital reserve fund to help replenish that. And I guess as budget cycles go on and as capital projects arise, you can kind of redeploy that money, number one, to subsidize debt service expenditures as you go through your budget process, or to even move it over to the capital reserve fund as projects are needed for your buildings. And you still have $15 million still in the debt service fund there moving forward.
And that's showing us that our total fund balance is hovering around 30 million.
That is correct, yes.
Okay.
And a lot of that, especially in the debt service fund, is just related to, I think we had some pretty sizable moves over to the debt service fund, and mostly because of revenues, those one-time revenues. So I think we've talked about this before too. If you have one-time revenues, you want to put it into those categories that you're going to have one-time expenditures, especially with capital projects. So here is the fund balance composition of all your funds. I think I cut off at the top there. It's the general fund, and then it's the capital projects fund. There's the debt service fund that's committed there. In the past, $2.5 million has been committed to employer retirement rate stabilization. That number has not changed. And then the unassigned amount is $9.9 million, which approximates that 8% of the next year's expenditure budget. Could look at that $2.5 million. I don't know. Everything, the PSERS rates hovering around 35, 36%. I don't know if it's going to go up, if it continues. I mean, seems like it's going to stay static at that amount. So that's another option too. If you want to smooth out any kind of increases in the future, you could use that $2.5 million. But as of right now, it's hard to say, which direction things are going to go with that rate as we move forward economically. And then also, we do audit the food service fund, total assets. I'm going to point out here, you can see there's total liabilities. The food service fund needs to be accounted for on the full accrual basis of accounting, so we have to put its proportionate share of the PSERS net pension liability and the OPEB liability in there as well. So the good news is a lot of school districts, because of that fact, have a net position or they have a deficit within their food service fund. But the district here has had a history of a very successful food service fund, coupled with the COVID monies that were received in most recent years. You actually have a positive $3.3 million. I don't know, Tom, does the PDE ever give you a hard time about the cash that's sitting in there?
We go back and forth.
Yeah. So PDE doesn't like to see a lot there. I mean, they, I think Tom has to come up with a plan to spend it on capital, et cetera. But in terms of, renovations, but I know PDE doesn't like to see, you're technically supposed to be at a break even, but a lot of districts are having this problem just because of the supply chain assistance, some of those other one-time COVID revenues that districts got. As you see here, operating-wise, every food service across the state, everybody has a loss, an operating loss. And then it is subsidized with the federal and state subsidies, which in the case of the district here is $3.2 million. So the overall change and positive net position of the district was $618,000 during the year. So we have a very successful food service program. Beginning of the year, the net position was 2.7, finished up at $3.3 million as of June 30th, 2025. So overall, I think the takeaways are the district currently has a lot of financial flexibility as you continue to go into your budget seasons. But, things are kind of, swinging the other way and, in terms of economically from what I can see across the board that it won't, it'll be a little bit tougher in the past, but, as of right now, the district has, adequate reserves to kind of respond to anything that's unanticipated, whether it be general fund unassigned fund balance, the debt service fund monies, etc. I don't know if anybody has any questions, concerns, but all good news.
Say, Tom, do you have a rough breakdown of the state versus federal reimbursement that we get of the $3 million, if you go back there, you have the, what is it, 2.6? Yeah. Look that up. Thanks.
Yeah, so there's a couple pieces to that $3.2 million. There's the flat-out meal reimbursement, the state and the federal, but also what's included in there too, if you remember, you have your own employees. So that reimbursement for retirement and FICA is also included there as well as the state source revenue as well. So you might want to break it up between FICA, retirement, and then also the actual meal reimbursements.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of wondering. And if we need to expand that program or have to, or at some point in time, like we did over the summer at one point in time, if we have a healthy balance, we might be able to do that in a pinch if we had to, so.
Continue the summer
Yeah.
reading program, which is state funded as well.
Okay.
But I think the bonus, the surplus does give you the opportunity to make enhancements to the food service program. Gives you the opportunity, right, for someone to say, you have to budget to a break even, then you can never fix anything, right? It makes it, it's a little short-sighted.
I mean, I know we took money for the coolers or the chillers we had bought for a couple of schools, some replacement equipment, so we are, it's being utilized within the program.
Lori is evaluating sort of refreshes to the kitchens at the elementary schools now. So
Okay.
we did the high school, as we recall, big changeover, which we did the same for the elementary schools.
And as they age, even though they were new schools 10 years ago, as they age, we have the revenue to be able to replace that, so we're not doing it as a capital improvement from the other side.
No, it's all comes out, it's all food service.
Right.
So, Lori brings a lot to food service.
Absolutely.
She really does, and is always looking to try to find new and creative ways to deliver food. And that's her, what gets her going in the morning. And then she's sharing, some neat ideas that make the elementary kitchens look more like a middle school kitchen, right? Where you're getting choices and food being, served to you.
Debits and credits get me and Tom going in the morning.
Any other questions?
All right, Sam.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thanks, Carl.
I do have one question.
Thank you.
More about, the scope of the audit. This is purely a financial audit. Is there ever an operational audit that's done in terms of, process, separation of duties, that kind of thing?
That's part of the report on internal control that we provide as well. We kind of determine whether there's any kind of, like you said, segregation of duties. We evaluate segregation of duties, who does who, is there proper channels of, reporting approval process, et cetera. So that is part, but we don't do anything operational in terms of looking at your numbers and see where you can cut costs and stuff like that. What we do is we look at, like it's a risk-based approach, and we're looking at the internal controls and seeing if there's any kind of risky areas in terms of the school district.
I think it was like page 20-ish of that report. When I looked through it real quick and looked at the index and stuff, I think it was somewhere in that area.
All right, thank you.
All right, thanks, sir. All right, that'll bring us back to our agenda. Mrs. Crossan, are you seeing the agenda page?
I am.
Okay, awesome. Okay. There is a lot to go through today, but I want to save the majority of the time to be able to talk about the budget and where we are with the various initiatives that we had put forth a month ago. So I will move through the financial section, the financial update, in order to get us there. But I think I think we're in good shape. Just our values, our focus. I think we continue to come back to the compass, keeping ourselves student focused. And I think, more and more a unified effort, right? Dr. Lukaba has demonstrated a focus for a unified effort. He's pushed administrators and team members across the district to be able to come together and move agendas forward and move ideas forward, whether it's the comprehensive plan or it's the budget, right? So we've been meeting at schools to bring a lot of these things forward. That's just the agenda. So these will be the statements for through February 28th. Mrs. Krieger had shared an idea, which was a very good one, in order to develop some benchmarks and some better ways to be able to report financial activity on our website. We're toying around with those ideas. I shared a couple of those, I think, 2 weeks ago in the weekly report. You can see here sort of that dial image of where we stand. Overall, we are a little bit behind in revenue. I think we kind of move back and forth just based on the timing of the state revenue. The other thing to take into account is within our total revenue, we have that $5 million transfer from debt service to the general fund, right? So that $5 million is lagging in this because I don't move it until we get to the end of the year, right? So we kind of measure that as we go forward. Top revenue lines are certainly, as it always is real estate taxes. That fuels the school district. Basic education funding comes in next in line, and earned income taxes of $3.8 million is in third. Mr. Hartline has asked before, I think our earned income taxes are in line with our budget and probably will be a little bit over. The other Act 511 taxes, transfer taxes, et cetera, I think they are really on track. I think they're all to the plus side, but to the plus side by $100 or so. This just shows compared year to date with last year, the current year, and the budget. I think that we're sort of tracking very well with regard to revenues. We do have an increase in local revenues, really due to the tax change. We've had the decrease in state revenues, which I believe is more of a timing issue relative to the state payments that are being made, and certainly a decrease in federal revenue as the ESSER dollars dried up. This is the same chart then with regard to expenses through the end of February. You can see we're very similar in each one of those cases with regard to the spend compared to the budget. Instructional programs obviously is our leading cost of expenditures. Debt service is the quick follow-up. When we look at the expenditures overall, we're about 1.1% more through February than we were the prior year. We see a reduction in our purchase professional services, which I think is helping our process and move forward. I think we're getting less kids out, so that will be a positive year end. Should be a positive year end. Salaries and benefits are to the plus side, which we would have expected. This slide talks about the comparison to the prior year. As you can see, revenue year to date to the full year actuals, and then the current totals on those four columns to the left. While revenue is lagging behind a little bit, expenses really seem to be on target or below. In this chart, looks like low by 2%, which again is a favorable planning as we look to shore up that budget and have something to truly compare against as we move forward in our budgeting process for next year. The full year projection, similar to last month, is showing about a $500,000 positive variance at this time, and we're continuing to move through as we move through the year. Any questions with regard to where we stand on the financials? I think I think we're in a pretty good pattern right now. I think we're sort of trending fairly consistently month to month. And we'll continue to work on trying to find unique ways to be able to share that information on our website through various, pictorial graphs, as well as just numbers that lay things out. These are, enrollment is a number, right? We should know what that number is, and we can have that in a change in enrollment as we move through years. So that'll be interesting.
Is there anything that the tax collector does in terms of communications that we might be able to leverage? Do they go out to the community?
It's up to the individual tax collector. I know that Bobby used to go out during peak times and go to like some of the larger residential areas like
She goes to us to collect. It's now Nicole.
Yep.
Karen, is your mic on?
Sorry.
yeah.
She
in-
comes to us to collect taxes, but
I'm saying,
Yeah,
so she would set up like in Centennial Station.
Yeah, the current tax collector does that already.
Right,
Nicole does
so-
that too. She goes to those areas,
So-
Five Ponds, Centennial Station.
So other than that stuff, there's really not much else that the tax collector, it does. I mean, other than the fact that they are probably the most recognizable face of the township. Same thing in Upper South, with their tax collector as well.
sort of align well to get the message out.
Yeah.
Because that's where the bill's coming from.
Yes.
So for them to understand it.
Right, but you have to keep in mind too that they are not, although they can offer information, they're really not supposed to offer opinion.
Right. And the tax collector for the towns as well.
Yeah.
Right, so but that's something there. All right?
What, I do have a question, so we are trending down, or we have a lack of a better term, a surplus currently in the supplies of 160,000. Do we have some large purchases that we're still planning on coming in for supplies towards the end of the year? I know we did the switches or some of the updates.
We don't. We do have some capital projects that are going to come through, as you mentioned, right? The switches are a capital project on the technology side. We do have a couple of those aligned and budgeted for and approved by the board. So those items on the capital side will continue to go forward. On the supply expense line, there's not a lot of, we're projecting of 4.9 and we budgeted 5 million. So we should be, I think we're pretty much in line with that.
Yeah, we're not looking to buy $100,000 worth of crayons.
We are not. We buy most of our crowns in September.
Yes.
Right.
Although they never last past October.
No. Any other questions? Mrs. Crossan?
No, I'm good.
Okay. So we'll jump right into then the budget update. I think as we've talked about the budget since since December, when we presented sort of our review of things that we were going to target. Much of the things take time to get off the ground, right? There's a lot of pre-activities, and we're going to try to touch base on those just to have a clearer sense of communication. And that was never more clear. Last night when I was speaking with Mrs. Krieger about the agenda, I think I get focused on the task at hand and less on the communication at hand. And I've got to figure a way to get a better balance to that so that there is an understanding as to what's going on, right? If without the communication, there's a feeling that maybe nothing's happening, but we'll show you, and I promise to you that the district is working hard every day around this budget.
I have a mechanism at Five Ponds because I own communications at Five Ponds on the board. So my intention is when we get this stuff out is to provide through our e-blast process the links to the information that are out there so that when people have questions, they now can go and say, hey, look, this is what's available on the website for you to understand where the financials are, why there's an increase. And maybe the answer is to try and talk to some of these other communities about what they may have as a mechanism for getting it out and leveraging that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we have a website, and we have a weekly e-blast process.
Right. That's quite a community, Five Ponds. So if you recall, these slides will be repeat. So our goals hasn't changed. We're looking to ensure fiscal responsibility through a comprehensive examination of district expenditures, aligning financial resources with strategic priorities that advance high-quality student outcomes with focus on efficiency. We will touch base this afternoon on those that are in red, our work around scheduling, discussion on the transfer of entity, access reporting, and our 1306-4605 process, retirement incentives, and zero-based budgeting. The first up looks at the transfer of entity, as we've talked about. The transfer, we're looking to transfer 2 autistic support classrooms that currently exist at Davis and are run by the intermediate unit. So I think it was, the reference to a school within a school was a true factor, and we're looking to bring those 2 classrooms to Davis and be a part of the full Davis Dolphin experience. We went through that. Dr. Hopkins met with the IU at the end of January, talked about the transfer of entity. We've gone through some financial analysis about what it will take us as a school district to bring that on. I was at Davis yesterday, 2 days ago, and met with the principal there and began talking about that, right? Because as he's aware of this happening, making sure that we have the supplies, making sure that we have the equipment, because when the IU leaves, they're going to take all of their toys with them, so to speak. So that's a part of our budgeting process of things that we need to take into account. So we've been evaluating costs. The next step that you will see is at the next board meeting, we'll be seeking board level action for us to reach out to the IU and move this transfer of entity forward. It will be approved by our board, then it'll be approved by their board, and then we will move into the process about hiring, right? Those teachers who have been teaching at Davis will have the right of first refusal to come and join Centennial, and we hope that happens. So, yes.
Do we know the quadrant that those teachers are in, and if they decline, as an example, and we have to hire, is there additional savings that would come out of if they decline, that you hire less expensive teachers if they're, in that most expensive quadrant?
Yes, we do. We know exactly where they are. We know what, where they, when you say quadrant, I just want to make sure I'm we're speaking the same language where they fall on the matrix. So yes, we know precisely their steps on the salary scale. We know their years. We know their levels of education, whether it's master's plus 27, master's plus 36, and where they fall. So we have that and that ability if they come over. And we factor that into our cost, that if they would take that in, because the way the law is set, they have the right of first refusal. So we are prepared pending board approval on the 24th to proceed with the transfer of entity. We are prepared to meet with both of those teachers 5 days later to have those meetings, at which time they will then have 10 days to make that determination if they want to jump over. If they do not, to answer your question, as I believe I heard it, there is the potential for additional savings in the event they don't want to join Centennial, because we would then go out and hire, and depending on where somebody would fall, it is possible that we would find someone with fewer years of experience. Obviously, given the nature of the autistic support level 3 classrooms that we would be taking over, we are looking for the most qualified and most competent folks to do that. So did I answer your question with that? The other thing I just want to bring up, not to belabor this slide, because Dr. Hopkins spoke to Ed Committee yesterday about this. Excuse me. But I think it's very important for the board to understand this. That projected savings that Mr. Greenwood talked about, which is $420,935, is actually a lowball figure. And the reason I say that is because we have over 90 students coming into the district in early intervention. Of those 90 students coming into the district, 25 have been identified already as autistic. They have a diagnosis of autism. Of those 25, it's very high, and it's very unusual, but it is high. And the diagnosis at that stage is unusual, but it's there. Of those 25 students who have been identified, it is very likely that there will be enough who are level 3 autistic, and therefore we would have to create a third classroom at Davis. Our proposal that we have prepared already takes into account an additional teacher and the appropriate support staff and the appropriate related services to handle 3 classes. Now, what's of note and why this is significant for the board is because next year, the BCIU is raising their tuition rates by 8.4%, which means that the cost per student goes from just under $98,900, it's like $98,900 something or $98,800 something, to a little over $107,000. If the IU were to continue, if we were to continue with the IU, that would be an additional $857,920 that we would pay just in tuition, not including related services for those additional 8 students. And that would take the bill from $1 million, and this is a set figure, this isn't up for negotiation. Next year, if we stay with the IU, the bill would be $1,715,840, and with a third classroom, that would rise to $2,573,760. We are prepared to deliver the same product with appropriate staffing, I believe enhanced effectiveness, because we're proposing RBTs, registered behavior technicians, 14 of them, at about $700,000. Our total cost is $1,294,905. That's a $1,278,000 savings on top of a better product. So we're very excited about this. We believe that this is not only going to position our district to be successful in terms of our programming for students, but we believe that it's also going to represent a very significant savings for the district. Obviously, these are IEP decisions. We work with families. I don't ever want that to be lost in any of this. This is not a predetermination, but I'm proud that we're doing, I'm very proud of the work that Dr. Hopkins and her team is doing, Mr. Greenwood. We've taken this very seriously. We've planned for this very explicitly. And we believe this represents not only an opportunity for our district to improve our delivery of services, but to do so with much more financial efficiency.
So how is the decision to go forward made on that?
The decision to go forward, we will require the board to approve positions on March 24th. And those positions, and I'll have this spelled out not only in my superintendent's update this weekend, but also in a presentation for the board that evening. We, excuse me, we would need board approval for the 2 transfer of entity right of refusal positions, which are the 2 classroom teachers that exist now. We are also asking the board for a 3rd teacher in anticipation of that 3rd classroom that I talked about. And we have anticipated that hiring to be around the $85,000 mark with salary and benefits combined. We are also asking for 14 registered, I'm going off memory right now, forgive me, but we're asking for 14 registered behavior technicians. That figure is around $740-some thousand. But that's all baked into that 1.2 million that I talked about. And then we are asking for 1 BCBA, which is a board certified behavior analyst who oversees the RBTs and actually delivers PD. It's a model that is very effective. But all in told, again, that represents the savings that I mentioned. So that would be the next step. And if that happens on March 24, but we're on a timeline, we have to move. And so as soon as that happens, the next day we send out that, and then we start to work with families through the IEP teams.
So what is the risk if you get an approval of a 3rd and then you go back to these 25 families? Is there a large risk in terms of them not wanting to do it?
No, there's actually, the risk with those 25 families actually isn't there at all, because we wouldn't, we probably would consider not using the IU and doing it ourselves anyhow with that new classroom. And I just put that out as a hypothetical. If we continued in our current model and didn't do anything internally, that's what we would pay. We'd pay about 2.5 million if we took on the 3rd. But the risk, Mrs. Krieger, it's a great question, is actually non-existent, because what we would end up doing moving forward, if you as a board said, we don't want to change, we want to pay the IU 1.7 million, we would say, okay, fine, but we're going to build a program for the new class ourselves and save the money right there. So there's no risk of that. The only risk that we identified that we put up there is staffing, because anytime you build a program, you have to staff it. And we believe we can. We've been recruiting. We're prepared and poised to do that. But we did identify it as a potential risk because it is a risk. There's always that potential that we wouldn't find someone. But because we're doing this in March and we're preparing for something that would launch in September, and we've been anticipating this in job fairs, and we are already working with our agencies, I don't think it's a very high risk at all, but I do want to identify it as such.
Can you explain, because I just don't understand the terminology, what these registered technicians, what their role is?
So and this is where I will give you to the extent that I have the knowledge, Dr. Hopkins will provide the board with a much more extensive and comprehensive definition. But a registered behavior technician is, so for example, in many classrooms, you have what's called a PCA, a personal care assistant, or an instructional assistant, an IA. A registered behavior technician is someone who has had additional education and training and is a much more highly qualified support staff person who can provide resources and support. So much so that one RBT can service as many as 3 to 4 students as opposed to a 1-to-1 model. So what we do is we would cut down on the ratios and bringing in 14, which is what we've identified as an appropriate number. Because of their training, they are able to more expertly interact with students and to do like a 1-to-3, 1-to-4. And they are, but they're a little bit more educated. And those aides are required to be in-serviced and trained, and they have to be supervised, and they have to be observed. I believe it's 3 hours a month by that BCBA. And so that board-certified behavior analyst has to observe each of the 14 RBTs, give them feedback, and make sure that their growth. The good thing about that model is that with every observation, with every passing month, and excuse me, that additional training, their capacity to do that job increases commensurate with those observations.
Are these 14 for all three classes?
Correct.
So
Yes.
the people that are in place now, what happens to them?
The IU would, because they were IU employees, the IU has them, the IU just takes them back and redistributes however they deem appropriate.
And the skill set of these registered behavior technicians, I assume, are better than that of the ones that were there.
That is correct, and that is why we're going with that model, because we believe that will allow us to deliver the programs and services that best serve the kids.
Has any consideration been given to the IU to let us purchase their toys and stuff they have?
I will talk to Dr. Hopkins about that.
Yeah, because, I mean, if they don't have to move them, if they don't have to transport them, they may be willing to sell them to us, in which case we only have to outfit one classroom in F3.
I mean, I think everything's on the table in terms of asking, and it never hurts to ask and see. Obviously, the IU services students all over the county, from the top of Palisades to the bottom of Bristol Township and everywhere in between. But so they may have places where they're opening up, because one of the realities facing all of the districts in Bucks County and in all the counties in Pennsylvania, but especially in ours, is that there are elevated levels of autism and there are more students who are being diagnosed. And so we have an obligation to meet those needs head on. But we're really excited about this, and I don't mean to belabor this, but this is a fundamental shift for our district.
It's one
I
we've
think
been
it's been-
asking for years.
Yeah.
I mean, it serves the students better.
Absolutely.
And all the way around with higher quality training and better staffing, and, I mean,
And the beautiful thing about it is that as a result of this, they're our students already, because they all live in our footprint. That's a very important point too. They're all Centennial students, and now they're Davis kids, and they are integrated into our schools, and they're taking part in our field trips.
Sense of
and they're taking
belonging.
part in exactly. It's community, it's capacity, it's all of those things. So I'm very excited about it, and I'm pleased that in so doing, we can deliver a product with better financial efficiency.
And I'm assuming that this also means that the average cost per special ed student is going to go down.
Technically, it would overall. I would have to calculate that, but because we're doing it with more efficiency, yes.
for
yes.
this cohort, yes.
That cohort, it would.
Yeah, and then by extension, because there would be a drop of, 1 point whatever, then, yeah, the aggregate would come down as well, yes.
One of the things that I was going to ask about this is, in the past, you've had presentations that take us out to 2030. What I think would be really great is to be able to take each of these initiatives and then say what that impact is, because this impact that we're presenting is an impact just for the next calendar
Yeah, there's a
year.
multiplier on it.
There's a multiplier
Yep.
effect, which would take that $23 million down
Mhm.
dramatically.
Yep.
Sure. No, and that is the intent, right? So as we clear the deck of these main issues, main priorities, if you will, not issues, main priorities, I think then we will then extend that through the 5-year plan, right? Okay. Any other questions on the transfer of entity? I think, Dr. Hopkins is really doing a fabulous job. It's very sort of uplifting to listen to her, and the passion that she brings to special education is overwhelming, and I think our students are really going to benefit from her. The next one up is zero-based budget, sort of detailed department budgets with expenditures justified from the ground up is the task. Budget books have been issued to all administrators. That was done in February. Dr. Lukova followed that up with an outstanding memo to all administrators, really dictating what we needed to be doing. I've begun to schedule meetings with school-based leaders as well as administrative teams to begin to review what that means, right? How do we want to do that? How do we want to format that? What are we looking to get back from them? So we'll be conducting those. My goal with each of those is to have the budgets back by the end of the month, and then be able to begin to sort of review and to then fold them into our consolidated financial reporting model that we have.
I'm assuming that the memo that went out from administration was far more comprehensive than the one last year. Because I know last year when we tried this, they were only showing $30,000 to $50,000 savings across the board.
I think, I would beg to differ. I think that historically, that's where the savings have come from, right? Have come from departments year over year. Whether it was with Mr. Gabriel in teaching and learning and learning technology, I think we squeezed those fruits fairly consistently. So I'm not as, I'm 150,000 in savings, right? I'm not overly ambitious. Our goal is between a 5 to 10% cut, but the goal is really to start with the ground up, right? I'm not looking for you to meet a number, right? I'm looking to you to get to a number is really the exercise, and I think that's the education that we're looking for in our administrative budget reviews, right? That it's not, hey, I got the 10%, Tom, right? And I've still got, right? It's to really dictate.
Yeah, it's a
that
mindset.
very clearly.
It's a what you need versus what you want.
Yeah, and if
And
you look at
that's-
some of the
as-
questions
yep.
down there, it is a mindset shift. What the mindset that we're trying to get away from is don't just take what you had last year and add a couple percents to it and move it over and move on. You know, we're telling people point blank, you must start from the ground up. Is it required by law or contractual obligation? We have to pay for it. You know, if it's essential to core operations or
guys.
student services.
I apologize. I have a hard stop at 5:45.
Okay.
I just let Karen know, but if you need me for anything, but you should be able to get everything passed through with Mr. Hartline there.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs.
Thanks.
Crossan. But we've really pushed the issue of like, I want you to take a very, very careful look at this and think differently. You know, what you used to have, that's not the world we're in right now. You know, this, and trying to explain this to folks, because when you've been living a certain way and you have to make changes, there's one thing to be able to understand that, but it's another thing to you can conceptualize it, but then when you have to actually do it, that's hard. And so we are asking that, which is why Tom is then going to be meeting with each division leader, because they're responsible. We're shifting responsibility onto these division directors, supervisors, administrators are taking responsibility. It's like, it's on you to make these cuts. And it's on you to examine the purchases that come through, so that the buck needs to stop there with them. Like, this isn't coming through. And so part of it is just training folks. I'll keep it there, but you get the point.
So I do have one question. Does this include also the potential consolidation of vendors?
It does, because to the extent that we, you know, can do that and get better rates as a result of that. So where possible, and sometimes yes, the consolidation in every area to the extent it is possible to consolidate. That is one of the outcomes.
Leverage our spend.
Yep.
We should be able to, and so when you see 62 vendors on the repairs and maintenance,
Yeah.
there's gotta be a way to bring that down.
Sure.
And say, hey, look, we're spending this kind of money, we need a better contract.
Yes.
So I think that's that final point on the chart, right? Really looking, once we have the expenses in hand, I think we can make better efforts to doing just that.
So when is the point in which all of the requests will end up starting to go to them? Like, is that already happening?
I'm sorry?
When is each request to purchase something going to start to go to these administrators to start saying, yay or nay?
Well, administrators do that every day today, right? So administrators have budgets, they approve expenses on a regular basis. That part is still a product of what we do. It's part of our control. It's part of our review. So those approval of budgets, if that's expenditures against the budget, if that's what you're referring to, that happens today. It'll continue happening. I think our focus is on what is that budget and what is included in that and how did you get there? And really pushing that, as Dr. Lukewa should, really a change in mindset. Okay? The next area up is scheduling, sort of a review of secondary staffing needs for efficiency and alignment with board policy. You can see the items. This is one that we've talked about a lot, and one that's we've been working on. It's just you just don't see it. So I'm glad to have the opportunity to be able to share it this way, right? So student course selection has been underway through much of January and February, with the school administrators taking that feedback from course selection and beginning to plot that out against their school schedules. Meetings have been held with administration to finalize these plans in keeping with board policies relative to student class sizes, things that we need to be doing. And that's started a week ago and has been in progress, right? They are repetitive, ongoing meetings as we continue to come back and ask questions and move that process forward. So that's sort of an in progress event. It'll, March, probably into the very beginning of April is the time frame that we are looking at, with staffing plans finalized in the month of April. The risk, as noted, is really careful monitoring of what we have going on, right? That's the key that has been brought up several times, right? And I think that as a comment has been talked about in years past. I think we're evaluating that at a much more granular level than we have ever before.
It's the arbitration that I think we have to see, that the teachers have gone far to object to doing this. That's the risk.
So, sure, and that is captured in an administrative regulation, which is administrative purview with the AR. But we have board policy that dictates class size. So obviously, we're not going to violate board policy with that. That said, to summarize, this year we have sat down with a very careful lens on scheduling efficiency. And it's something we're taking very seriously. We are working through to see just how we are scheduling, because there's a way to be congruent with board policy and increase efficiency. I mean, for example, years and years, our district, and I say this with full understanding of many, many factors, but most districts don't run courses with 10, 11, 12 students sitting in them. Find ways to maximize staff. You look at your certifications. You look at, whether or not retirees need to be replaced. If we can efficiently schedule in a way that you may not even have to bring back.
That was going to be my question is.
That's one of those things we're looking at.
Yeah.
So all of those things are on the table. Obviously, we're doing it in a careful and respectful way. We want to make sure that we are never in violation of a collective bargaining agreement or board policy. But operating within those parameters, there are opportunities for savings.
Especially because we're limited by code on how we can eliminate teaching positions.
That's correct. There absolutely are guidelines and procedures and timelines. And some of those timelines are not only are they well defined, but they're coming up quickly. And so we know that, which is why that timeline is, finishing this by the beginning of April so that we can be compliant with timelines.
Do we know, I know we had a lengthy list at this last meeting. What is our FTE retirement so far? Do we have a number?
We're looking at about 10 that had come inside. That's an upcoming slide, right? 10 or so teachers who made it within our incentive window. There is also, there's a group then that follows that, which is like the whisper group, those who are considering retirement. And there could be another, 2, 3, 4 additions to that group.
From a legal standpoint, if the board were to come back with a motion saying we are only willing to fill 5 of the 10 positions, that we want to see a reduction of 5 positions, are we within our legal rights? Because I kind of remember this in the past, but I don't know if the laws have changed in the last 10 years.
So obviously I would want to triangulate this with our solicitor, but we are, because staffing and scheduling, again, working within those parameters that I mentioned earlier, is the purview of a school district and administration to do so per policy and administrative regulations. And so I don't think it comes down to a number. It comes down to a justifiable need. And as long as you can examine and project that need in a way that is congruent with board policy, with ARs, and with the bargaining agreement, so that, again, violations aren't in place. We want to honor all of those things. But we can still do that, but I don't think there's a number attached to it. That's obviously something I can follow up with our solicitor to look at.
Right. I don't necessarily, I mean, I just want to make certain that if the board were to make that decision, I mean, if we were to say, all right, there's, we have 10 retirees, we only want to backfill 5 positions, right-size the classrooms and balance the staffing, 5 positions, you're looking at $1 million a year, year over year. Approximately, obviously. And you don't have to necessarily worry, and it's not a worry at that point, but you're not curtailing a program. You're not you're not laying off for reasons of financial hardship or what, the 3 categories or 4 categories that are enumerated in the code.
And that's why it's maybe better to not even assign a number to it as much as, the board would direct administration to take a very careful approach and analysis to each of the certification areas and each of the course levels and each of those disciplines to see, because, and I'm just using this as a wild hypothetical.
Yes, these are.
But you could have 10 retirees and all 10 could be mathematics teachers. Well, guess what? We may have to go back and replace a number of them in order to keep our natural course selection and our course offerings flowing, in which case we wouldn't be able to honor a directive that had an actual number attached to it. But I think the board has been very clear about its intent or its desire for us to take this seriously and to go out and do it, which we are continuing to do.
So in effect, the number of people that are in scheduling that you would reduce would really be in addition to these people that are retiring. There's no overlap.
Potentially, there could be some overlap. So, for example, we might factor a retiree into what yes, there could be overlap. Yes, yes. I was processing your question as I was answering it. Yeah. Yeah, it's not in addition to, it's all interwoven.
And keeping in mind too that many of our teachers are cross-trained in multiple disciplines.
Yeah, and we have all that, we have those records and that ability that if we have to, if somebody's dual certed in checkerboarding.
We are very fortunate in that.
All right. To Mr. Hartline's always good at looking at the slide ahead. I'm not going to hand out the paper copy next time. So the incentive for the professional staff, the board approved the retirement incentive in January. That was shared with CEA in January following that meeting. I think we have, this says 9. I think there's potentially 10 teachers who qualified, giving notice by February 28th that they were going to retire. And then I think, the window is open, right? I think there are, as I said, another couple, 2, 3 maybe, that are considering retiring, right? When looking at some of them, they may not have any sick days left, so the incentive that we put forth doesn't impact them, doesn't cause them to come to the door. But I know that, the whispers, I'm talking to the principals, as we're talking to the administrators, and they're saying, this person told me, but they haven't told HR, right? And until you tell Beth Cadis, you're not allowed
Till
on
you
my
sign,
piece of
till you
paper,
sign that
right?
paperwork.
So she's relentless in that pursuit. So those are the steps that we are looking at. And to Mrs. Krieger, there is overlap between this group and the scheduling group as well, right? So we don't see risk relative to this number. And this is the savings really based on where that retiring teacher is today on the salary grid and where we would factor them to be, right? And we put in there between steps 1 and 4 with a master's degree. So that's not the lowest level, but that gives us a marker to go forward and base our budgeting on.
And there's always variance in that. Sometimes there are certain areas that there aren't as many teachers available, and you may have to go beyond. Mr. Greenwood did add something on there in that third window I want to just point out, which is potential additional retirement incentive. Teaser alert, we are examining a potential additional retirement incentive. We want to just look at it some more, think about what that might mean. Obviously, put that in front of the board, and that could yield additional, that number, the reason it says ongoing is because were we able to do it and put it out and folks would be interested with the board's approval, of course, we could increase that number. Now, we don't do that lightly because obviously you have to think about the balance of that over time. You don't want to have a mass exit of people. There's a lot of institutional knowledge, and you want to try to manage that over time. But I think the realities of what we're facing with our deficit, coupled with an opportunity, and to do it in a reasonable way that respects folks' needs.
Yeah, I mean, with 400 professional staff, plus or minus 10 to 15 leaving, is certainly a manageable number.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And we've already, our new Chief Human Resources Officer, Mrs. Mossman, one of her priorities that we've discussed, and she's already done it, she's been to 3 job fairs already. We are heavy on the recruitment trail. We want to get out in front of it. We are not waiting until June to start hiring people. We are getting resumes. We are meeting people. She is actively, she's doing another one tomorrow, another one Monday. We are hitting the pavement to recruit.
She's been fantastic. All right. Staffing alignment, sort of as we look at evaluating support staff positions as well, sort of universal in our review, to make sure that we are staffing with good and logical efficiency. We're going to look to implement position control, which the district hasn't had, but with our move to the cumulative model in Skyward, position control is now a reality. So with Ms. Mossman coming here, she had implemented some level of position control at Penn Ridge, where she came from. We're working with Jim Creighton to try to organize that. And that really just sets standards at which positions, how many positions there are at various levels, and really sort of creates a stop should that number if we try to increase that number. So it would prevent sort of additions that we aren't fully going through the works and the workarounds. So that covers any support staff positions, right? So they could be custodians. They could be almost anybody that would fall under that spectrum, right? We want to look at defining the need, looking at the school sizes, making sure there's some equity between schools, and making sure we're managing those correctly. One of the things that we've come across in listening as we've gone to schools talking about scheduling, right, is, hey, I've got this and that, let's try to figure that out. So this is just another step in this progression.
This would not include like IAs and PCAs. This is This
could,
is,
yes.
it would include IAs and PCAs,
Right.
okay.
Yep.
All right.
Essentially, and I mean, to boil it down into like one simple description, it's a way that districts, first of all, a district should have position control because it literally identifies every role in the district, every position we have. And then it also develops a matrix of how many do you really need so that you're not just out there hiring absent an understanding of what you need. So it's a needs-based approach to hiring. And then it allows you to keep meticulous records on what you have, what you need, so that you're not over hiring, under hiring, you're not understaffed. It allows for
Welcome to my
precision.
world.
Right, right.
Yeah.
But it's a mechanism to ensure precision.
All right. I think this might be the last of the slides with regard to access, medical billings, as well as the 1306 and the 4605 forms. This comes up often as, when Dr. Lucabaugh arrived, this was an early agenda item that we started tackling almost immediately. So we have created more clear processing of the 4605, 1306 students. We are issuing invoices. We are practicing that every day, as well as looking to maximize our access funding. There is a position that we're looking to have approved for an access coordinator, and that would be someone who would be a district employee really focused on maximizing and making sure that we're including all the expenses that create the reimbursement through the access program. We currently, we have the larger pot driven out of our school and out of our office here. There's also access billing that happens at the IU relative to the services they're providing. And the IU in that part of managing that access group of funds, they take 20% cut on that number. So 23,000 of that salary that we're looking for is already going to someone at the IU. We're looking to bring that person in and have them really diligently addressing each of these issues. This isn't an area of necessarily savings, which is sort of the bottom line there. The current budget, as shared with you in January, that is a part of that $7 million deficit, includes $500,000 in access funding, as well as $500,000 in 4605 in receipts from other LEAs. So we are targeting a $500,000 number. I think we are going to hit $500,000 this year. So we will continue to work through that number. The risk on that side is it's really a student-based thing, right? So we are practicing, we are working hard to making sure we're getting the invoices out, the processing to occur on a seamless basis. The team has really come together very nicely. It is a complicated process. It is repetitive. You need to send letters. You need to send up to 3 letters in order to make sure it happens, and then you've got to chase it down. So it's detailed and very focused, and we have a very good team working on that.
Yeah, and this is one too where it takes tremendous documentation, where districts tend to get the lack of documentation, the carelessness with not documenting everything appropriately is where money's lost. And this is really, we put this on here because this is an opportunity for us to maximize billable services. And there's a whole list of them. I mean, I just pulled it up because I don't have this committed to memory, so I don't want to make it sound like I'm rattling this off the top of my head. But some of the common billable services are speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, nursing services, psychological services, counseling services, behavioral health services, specialized transportation. And if a student qualifies for Medicaid, we can bill for certain services that are part of an IEP, but it has to be written into the IEP, it has to be provided, and then it has to be documented at the time of it. And then we submit claims through a billing system or a vendor, and then Medicaid reimburses the districts. If it's done right, you're talking 7 figures. And so but it's meticulous and it is a full-time job. You need someone whose sole responsibility is to make sure this is done with precision.
Yeah, so the IU doing it, when I was on the IU board before, that was our goal, because so many of the school districts were missing out on funds and they weren't able to do the paperwork. We hired, a couple individuals to do it for that purpose.
And we're proposing that, and you're right, and this is not uncommon. Like, I'm not saying this is a Centennial issue solely. A lot of districts don't maximize this. And so our thinking is that if we hire a dedicated medical access coordinator, not pay 20% off the top, and then have that person for a market value salary be able to maximize and get everything for which we're entitled, and then train people how to do it properly and how to bill things right and how to document it, we will see a revenue increases that we should be getting and we should be pursuing.
Do we have, like the support classrooms, do we have to provide a lead time for the IU to let them know that we're going to be pulling this back in-house? So I'm going to make sure that we don't miss that window and be stuck for another year.
And the access, the laundry list that Dr. Lukova just shared, right? That's extensive, and the rules around that have changed, particularly over the last 2 years, around the support and the details that you need and the timesheets and the sign-offs that are required in order to submit for reimbursement, right? So access is a reimbursement function, right? So we submit lists of expenses and they give us credit for an amount of that, a percentage of that.
And it's also an education to the parents that this applies to for these students, that this is not, they're not foregoing their insurance reimbursement that they would normally be getting. This is something additional for the district.
It's an underutilized revenue stream that with careful monitoring and documentation, because you can be, there are so many things that you can use the money for. You can bring in personnel, you can bring in, for example, we could go out and buy special education curriculum. We could buy vans, equipment, chairs, lifts, you name it.
Stuff to support the autistic classrooms.
And things that it's at a zero that we don't have to budget for because we have done it properly. So
we've used it over the past for counselors.
Well, for medical access, we can't. But the I don't know how much far we can go back. I think we went back into last year and had to settle the.
It has to do with the last.
I think there's a
audit.
2-year. I think there's whatever the audit
back.
was. There's a window on it. But all of those process, the 1306 and the 1405, that's all been tightened, so that we're going to maximize that from students who are out of district living within our footprint. Now again, that one isn't as easy because we send out the bills, but sometimes districts drag their heels in paying it, but we just keep at it. The medical access billing represents a real opportunity for us to maximize. And again, I want to be really clear, this is not an indictment. Many districts are so overwhelmed that they simply don't have the mechanism in place to get what they deserve. We can change that.
All right, so that was the last slide. And, this just shows a savings summary to date as shared throughout those 6 items that we've discussed, right? Some are placeholders, right? Some have opportunities as we move forward through the cycles. And so that's where we are at the moment, right? So that's $2.2 million in savings. The majority of that is ongoing savings, to Mrs. Krieger's earlier point, as we look down the road and look at those savings, right? The savings could vary from time to time, right? Because as you replace an older teacher with a new teacher, that teacher then is now on the ladder and their salary moves. But the opportunities are significant in terms of what the administration has brought to you before. And I think we have opportunities, as we've shared, to make potentially even greater strides.
Were you intending to present in March the initial round of grants and how to leverage CEF?
That's something that we are developing too, which is an opportunity for either stipend or something that we can get someone in place to start pursuing that aspect as well, and try to shake out every possible grant dollar that we can find out there.
Is that something for March or it's going to take longer than that?
It's possible that we can have that up, and I think we can post for it, if not by March, by April, to have that in place and then look to hire that position. And that position pays for itself as well, just by the acquisition of grant monies. And again, that's another underutilized revenue stream that people miss out on. And so to be able to, and you had shared that directory, Mrs. Krieger, which was very helpful, to be able to really tenaciously go after what's out there. But it starts by having somebody who's dedicated to it. And that's why districts flounder with it, because they're so overwhelmed with things, which why we think putting a dedicated person.
I say, because the IU did at one point have somebody, we had hired somebody strictly to do this for districts throughout, school districts throughout the county, because we knew there were so little. I think the IU took 10%, not 20. But yeah, because it's.
Bucks is going after a
Oh.
ton of
Mhm.
equipment grants.
Yep.
And they're getting the awards.
Well,
We're talking about
And
hundreds of thousands of dollars.
And they have the, I forget what it's called. It's I forget the name of it because we discussed it at the liaison meeting, where it's quite a bit of paperwork. And if they screw it up, it's $400,000 they don't get. And it is a federal grant, not a federal grant, but it is a grant that is very tightly scrutinized.
We are looking at Mr. Wirt. Go ahead, I'm sorry. No, go ahead, Dr. Lukowicz.
For example, we just submitted a PCCD grant that we think we'll get, and that'll bring in a little under 200,000 to the district.
And we did 300,000 last year for security. Yeah.
So,
So,
Intend to present this at the next board meeting?
we certainly can do it as part of the presentations, just to put it out there. Okay, yeah, we can do that.
Very, very helpful. And I think the thing that I would add is what you think that means for the
Projected longitudinal.
out, so that people will have an understanding of what we've really done to the deficit with these initiatives.
okay. And on that grant, Mr. Wertman also, we got the PCCD grant out the end of February, which Dr. Lukowicz pointed out. And Mr. Wertman also went after a capital grant to replace the roof, and I believe it's Klinger, right, that we committed to covering 25% of the cost, but the 75% of the cost is a much larger piece. So he pushed that grant out. I don't know if he included that in last week's update or if it's coming up in this week's update, but that was a remarkable effort on
There was
his
a
part
tease at
to
the,
keep pushing that through.
Yeah.
So,
it's,
We're going after the FCS schools and looking for a way to fund those as well.
right.
Where we have to come up with the 25%, we're just gonna look at the reserve and see where else we might be able to get funding.
we had done a lot of that when we redid the middle schools. There was grant money that came in for lighting and, point work and,
Yep.
that offset a
lighting
considerable,
was- we did.
tens of millions of dollars, so, yeah.
Okay. Any questions on the presentation? Okay, then we're back into the agenda. So number 7 is informational items that we have. It is just the standard PSDLEF monthly reports. We have no requests for consideration at this time. And we have no additional community comments. So I guess the informational item, I don't know if we have to approve bringing those forward, but if we could have a vote on the bringing forward of the monthly reports, I'll add that to the minutes. Can I have
So
a-
moved.
All right. Excellent. Okay.
I do have one other thing that I wanted to raise in terms of, I brought up, with regard to the finance committee, and potentially getting folks, constituents in here to help with the communication, coming up with ideas, and I don't know whether that's something that we can do. So like, you know, I've had a couple of conversations with, Adam Mathias, who has a accounting background, whose wife works in the district, and they also have a student in the district, and I thought, what a better person to try and come, you know, forward with what he might think.
I will tell you that when we had these meetings at 7 o'clock at night, we had a participation from the community. Now that the meetings are during the days or during the day, we get very little participation from the community. But when we were doing them, you know, at nighttime, it was a much better response.
Because you know what, part of this is gonna be buy-in from the, I mean, the teachers clearly are gonna have an opinion about this, the taxpayers, I'm sure, have an opinion about it. And I'd rather get as much of that feedback and buy-in as possible to hopefully make this as palatable as possible.
Okay. With that, we have a meeting to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
All right, thank you very much.
Did you find this information about the, special ed kids?
I didn't, but I will. Let me turn the